Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Oh, give me a team individual. Give me a couple teams individually that jumped out to you.
Well, I heard your theory in you talking about the Rodgers situation. I think it's just simple. And I know coaches and executives like GMs, the league, all they care about is money. I mean, that's their job, right? So the ratings. I think Rodgers is still a massive needle mover. And like the week one, I thought when I was looking at the potentials, because I thought the Niners were going to get Sunday night or Monday night football. You kind of feel once you knew Thursday night, we already knew the Friday night game. We didn't know the Sunday night game, but I was like, I think the Niners are getting one of those. You looked at their schedule. It's like, I could see them throwing the Cowboys or the Jets. And then once it was reported that the Cowboys did the Brady thing, which is genius. I mean, how many people are going to watch that game? 35 million people on Sunday afternoon. The Niners, when they're winning, are a top 2 or 3 brand in the league rating wise. And Aaron Rodgers by himself, especially coming off this injury, controversial to some, but he's just a polarizing player. And the Jets are a New York major brand. I don't know if the Jets are going to be very good. I'm sure we'll dive into it. But you put that thing on, just like they did last year. I remember, like all of us around the country, sitting there, Jets, Bills. It's going to feel really big and do a huge number. But tough game for him. It does get a little easy off the bat. Then he goes to the Titans. Then he plays the Pats, who I think are going to be terrible. Denver, rookie quarterback. McGlinchey's their right tackle. The Jets have a good pass rush. Minnesota, we'll see. They're in a little transitional period. So the Monday night game, if they can just get through that healthy, I do think they could rattle off a couple wins.
I saw it the opposite. My take was that you can only do so much because the Jets, the schedule is what the schedule is, right? You
the teams,
right. And a lot of it's baked in. You play the Bills twice, Miami twice, New England twice, your conference, your division plays certain divisions. But I thought they made Aaron's season as tough as you could make it. So they start, it's weak, right? So first of all, the last thing you want to do in a rebuild O-line is face the Niners defensive front in week 1. That's a tough draw. 3 games in 11 days to start, again, with a rebuilt O-line. They have 5 short weeks and an international game in weeks 1 through 11. So the schedule, the quarterbacks they face isn't daunting. They could have done them way more rest favors. Older quarterbacks and older people tend to be creatures of habit. As I've aged, I really like Peyton Manning. Hated Sunday night football games. Hated.
You're waiting around all day.
Aaron Rodgers, they give him 3 games in 11 days to start, 5 short weeks, an international game, and Niners with an O-line rebuild. The quality of the opponent isn't great.
It is Will Levis and Jacoby Brissett.
I will acknowledge that. The games are the games. But old quarterback, rebuild O-line, and a lot of short weeks. It's like for older quarterbacks, like Brady would tell you, like, I want to get going. Those old quarterbacks love 1:00 games. They love them.
What? And there is not a harder travel than playing Monday Night Football if you're a coastal team, but on the East Coast to the West Coast and flying home. Because what time are they? The game ends at 8:15. By the time they get out of there, they're getting home at 5, 6 in the morning.
Hey, football fans, if you're looking to dominate your fantasy league next year, then we've got the channel for you. From the NFL draft through training camp in week 1 to Super Bowl Sunday, Fantasy Pros is the home of football content you cannot afford to miss. Subscribe today, and your team will be in championship form in no time.
So it is, and then it's difficult on your coach. It's a very, very difficult stretch. But if you had to draft, if you knew you were playing the Niners across the country Monday Night Football, I think we could all acknowledge the Titans might be a top 5 team you would pick, right? Just independently. So, and then the Pats on a short week, your home opener. I think the Pats are going to be pretty bad. Plus, you just have a lot of, your divisional opponent. And then you get Denver rookie quarterback off that kind of mini bye. So if they can find a way to be 2-1, I think they're in pretty good shape going to Denver. Though, and I've been I would say, very hesitant, and I was very bullish on him last year. Like you said, a lot of older players, and these aren't just like older accomplished. These are older, often injured players. And I listen, clearly modern medicine and these surgeries have improved greatly. I mean, my dad had the same injury Chris Finch had in the mid 90s, and he did it in New Zealand fishing. And they told him he would never walk straight again. Now he's like, send me back to America. But still, it was a much different procedure in 1996 than it is for him. I mean, he's up on the bench a week, 2 weeks later. Not saying that he can walk, but my point is, I think we just accept Cousins and Rodgers. I mean, both these guys are old. And Rodgers is really old because he's been playing a lot longer, and his game is much more predicated on moving around. So maybe modern medicine is just incredible. We won't notice it as much, but I would be hesitant. I say the same thing with Atlanta. I think most people that follow football are like, Atlanta's going to win the division. They are? I like Raheem Morris, but we have no clue what he's going to look like as a head coach. Cousins coming off the Achilles, the weirdness with the Penix. Their defense is more than a question mark. And there's a healing process. Remember Tom coming off the ACL that next year? He was very hesitant. And he's Tom fucking Brady. So we're talking now. Rodgers is much more accomplished than Cousins. So if he is just, I think we would both agree if he's playing at a B or B plus level, they would be a real team. But if he's a C plus ish level and not the movement wise, the other factor with them is, and I think we've both talked about it on our shows, that leak about the coordinator situation. Like, regardless, the Jets are always a mess because of the ownership. Their coordinator's just not very good. So I know Aaron's friendly with them, but it's not like he's Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan or Andy Reid. I mean, that's a huge part about the sport, right? Who's calling the plays? Maybe Aaron just ends up essentially calling the plays.
So I said I think the NFL wants to see Jim Harbaugh get up to a good start. They open with arguably the two easiest games on their schedule: Raiders at home and Panthers. That's about the, Raiders aren't good. They get them at home, and then the Panthers. So those are good. That's a 2-0 start probably. I also looked at the NFL with Chicago. Again, Fox would love Chicago to pop. I mean, just a huge market.
So would I.
What do they get with a rookie quarterback? Tennessee at home to start. New coach, new staff. And then week 5, home Carolina. A very winnable game against Washington early. They get a bye into it, so 2 weeks to prepare for a very winnable game. Those feel like wins to me for Chicago. I do think, again, you could have stacked Green Bay on the road early. You could have stacked this schedule, Detroit, open at Detroit, because those, Chicago's a big brand. They gave them a couple of layups early.
I do think when it comes to a rookie quarterback, let's use Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, for example. They're playing the long game. Sean Payton's not going anywhere. This new operation in Washington's. So if there's up and downs and your guy loses confidence, takes him a couple weeks to gain it back, whatever. We're okay winning 6 games this first year. There is tangible pressure on the coach in Chicago, right? He can't afford to go 7-10 or he'll be fired. I agree with you on the Titans situation. But then their next 3 games for a young quarterback who is extremely talented, like, it's not like he's coming off an 11-win season. I mean, it was a lot. At the Texans, at the Colts, I think both those teams are going to be really good. They both loaded up. Indy just drafted a pass rusher in the top 15. The Texans added one during free agency. And then you play the Rams. Like, that's just a tough early stretch. I don't care how talented you are. Young people, confidence can ebb and flow. And the pressure, Chicago, the hype. I do think that's just a tough early stretch. Now, if all of a sudden they're 3-2, I mean, we might be looking at a 10 or 11 win team.
Did you notice with the Cowboys schedule? And we know in the last month, mostly the NFL wants division games. You want your Miami Buffaloes, although Miami Buffalo,
especially your good teams that you think are going to be competing
Buffalo
for the playoffs
pretty early. But Dallas has 3, out of division games that are pretty tough. The Niners, the Ravens, and the Lions. They're done with all of them by week 8. So with Dallas, again, McCarthy, Dak, this is an experienced team. They don't backload it, because they know the Giants and Washington won't be great. They get their 3 toughest, to me, the 3 games that you look at and go, the 3 best rosters they play will probably be San Francisco, Baltimore, and Detroit. And those are all done by week 8. So if you go 1-2 on those, they could have stacked a couple of those, week 14, week 13. So you go into these tough, brutal, cold weather road games in division. No, they got rid of their tough games early. Again, what do I like Harbaugh getting a 2-0 start? Listen, Dallas I thought it went in their favor. That was my take.
I do think that Cleveland, I'm not expecting the same what we saw last year. I mean, obviously they're all in a Deshaun Watson. His cap hit has really kicked in. The roster's, I don't think, going to be as good just moving forward, obviously. And I'm not sure he's still a good player. But even if they take a huge step back, we all know week one is tough, right? You could play the worst team in the league in week one. Everyone has the same hopes and dreams. Everyone's 0-0, especially at home. And Cleveland is a tough place to play. And the hype on that game with Brady calling it, that's a sneaky big game because then all of a sudden, like, I think most people think the Saints were really shitty last year. They did go 9-8 and their offense was mainly putrid. Well, they add Kubiak's kid who comes from Shanahan. I think the Saints are going to be better. And then you got Baltimore. It's just a tough little early stretch for a team that, I don't want to say they're walking on eggshells, but the McCarthy story, the Dak, if they don't extend them, it could get weird and it could get weird fast. I just got that Cleveland game circled. I think that is going to be I can see Cleveland winning that thing and Cleveland being a 6-7 win team.
Speaking of Cleveland in that division, I'm going to make an argument that the toughest schedule in the league I saw was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay.
Oh, it's really hard.
So you have better rosters than these teams, but they load them up at Atlanta, at Denver, at Indy, and Harbaugh. That's a rough start. I mean, again,
I agree.
You have better rosters than Atlanta, Denver, the Chargers, and Indy. 3 of the 4 on the road, and you come out of that road streak with Dallas 2 weeks later, Aaron Rodgers. Like, that's rough. And did you see the last 6 quarterbacks Pittsburgh faces? Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, and Burrow. Like, Mike Tomlin is going to be on a network broadcasting. And by the way, I predict he'll be great. I've talked to 2 network execs who would hire Mike Tomlin tomorrow.
Are you shorting the Steelers this year?
I am shorting them. I mean, did you have to put at the end of the year, the last 3 quarterbacks, Lamar, Mahomes, and Burrow in the last month?
Did you see the story, though, about Burrow's hand surgery, the percentage of it keeping? Most surgeries are 90 to 95%. That wrist hand surgery is like 70 to 75% success rate. And then no matter how well it goes, there's basically guaranteed inflammation. It's a little trickier than just your ACL or your broken leg. I do think that's something to keep a heavy eye on. Now, if he plays 17 games, I think we'd all acknowledge they're going to be one of the better teams in the NFL. But if that thing crops up where it is, I mean, it would be a major problem.